Welcome back. Thank you for coming back so promptly. We're going to get straight into the next session. There are three sessions. There are three sessions before lunch, so we'll have further opportunity to network and talk then. The first session is a panel session. Let me introduce to you Richard Macchiesi, the General Manager at VISY for Insights and Innovations. Richard is in the heart of this smart factory world, Industry 4.0, and he has been there for over 13 years. Richard searches the world for innovation and improvements in this space, and he'll lead this panel of experts unpacking all of the Industry 4.0 issues for you. Please make Richard welcome. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for the introduction. Being an Israeli environment here today, I thought I'd actually wear my shark socks because I found that being in Israel, the sharks are circling as companies like ours start to explore what is something of my favourite term, as I've talked about with Etty plenty of times, the whole ecosystem and how it works. For those who don't know, VISY is a vertically integrated paper and recycling or packaging and recycling business, and at certain times has been touted as the largest privately owned business of its sorts. We have had a fantastic and exciting venture into Israel. We've been twice now, and I'd say we're relatively young in terms of how experienced everybody is here. But one point I would like to make, and Sam Lipsky, who's a colleague of mine in the audience today, has been in Israel with our previous patriarch of our business, Richard Pratt, for 20 years, and they've been investing in not only innovation but cultural and social issues. So we'd like to feel, or we sort of feel, that we are in some ways pioneers in the Israel market. And he's been championing myself to be there, and often reminds me that I should be there more often. What we've done as VISY, just to give a quick background, is that we've started to say, okay, there's a lot of venture capital going on in this area, in the adoption or funding of new ideas. We believe that there's an action model that we're adopting, and that's more around the activity that we as a business can do. As I suggested to one of the panel members, that what we are looking at and what we are trying to discover is technologies at a very early stage, and that investment is through action. So no doubt any supplier of a technology here who uses VISY as a case study, or somebody who can adopt the technology early, as you go to venture capital afterwards, something that's been piloted, scaled, and or in some ways implemented and demonstrated, it means that the venture capitalists have to pay you an inordinate amount more money. So we're assuming that this might be a little bit of a subtle change to what is an existing model today. Industry 4.0 is one of those exciting things that almost becomes a buzzword. As we like to put a 0.0 on pretty much everything we do today, 4.0 is the fourth generation of industrial change, as it started with steam in the 1700s, right through to the adoption of electricity, and then into computers. Into more recent times, now we're starting to look at the convergence and impact on our value chain of a number of technologies. And I'm the most spoilt moderator, I think, in terms of my session, because I've had such fantastic panel members join me covering what is probably a number of the different elements that we see today, right from the factory of the future right through to what we saw this morning in terms of autonomous vehicles, and also Airobotics, which is a really exciting technology. So I invite my panel members to come up onto the stage, and we can get the session underway. We're all referring to where we're meant to be sitting, as well as we're trying to be the model group of sitting in the right position. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining me. I think this will be a really exciting session. I just thought we might start off in order, just to give a quick background, and obviously we've heard from a couple of you today and also yesterday maybe just a little bit of reference in terms of, maybe your experience with Industry 4.0 and more so just in terms of your businesses particularly. So, Amnon.
So hi everyone again. I talked about Mobileye. Mobileye is my second company. There's also a third company called Orcam that in total, the idea is to develop artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies that learn and are able to provide significant value. So in the area of Mobileye, we're talking about autonomous cars, crash avoidance systems. In the area of Orcam, we're talking about providing information to the blind and visually impaired about the visual world, and that they can also talk to the device and ask questions. And in general, my area of research at the university, I'm also a professor at the Hebrew University, is about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computer vision. And I think I'll talk a bit about artificial intelligence later. What exactly it is. There's some kind of misperception about thinking about Skynets or the rise of the robots, and I'll try to put it in perspective.
Great, thanks. Bronwyn.
Hi, I'm Bronwyn. My great passion is doing research that makes a difference to industry, and I've been doing that for more than 20 years now. Worked with everyone from multinational OEMs, tier one suppliers, startups, SMEs. I've worked with startups that have become SMEs, that have become multinational companies. So it's been a really amazing experience. At Swinburne, in our Factory of the Future, we have a showcase for design-led innovation, and it's a space where you can come and create and experiment and explore. But we will be establishing next year Australia's first Industry 4.0 test lab, and we're really excited to do that. We're also launching our Manufacturing Futures Institute tomorrow, and we had an event at the Factory of the Future about a week ago where my boss actually publicly sacked me and then reinstated me as the new director of the Manufacturing Futures Institute. So we're really excited about broadening the scope of the Factory of the Future at Swinburne.
Right.
Hi, I'm Ron. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Airobotics. We're actually building Skynet, as Amnon said, for real. No, not really. We're doing automated drones. So basically, changing the perception of how drones should be used, especially in industrial facilities, rather than using them as with an operator. We're building a completely automated system that funnels the data and transforms it into insights for the facility to increase efficiency and safety measures.
So my name is Carlos Benaim, and I'm the CEO and founder of Deep Learning Robotics. In my vision, this ability of having robots that adapt to changes, to constant changes in a very easy way, it's a must in Industry 4.0 and will be a must in Industry 5.0 as well. And this combination of vision, deep learning technologies, and robotics, I think it's a basic component in this path towards these improvements in industry processes.
Good morning, I'm Ztiki Fuchs. I'm the CEO of Bio-Nexus. I've been listening for the day and a half over here, and I actually am very pleased to say that we tick most of the boxes. So we started from Israel. We have an office in Australia. We were founded by Australian capital. Bio-Nexus basically developed what we call the mobile workflow engine that actually digitized any workflow, any protocols related. And for the last year and a half, we actually are deploying projects or deploying the software in what you call Industry 4.0 in industrial or utility companies.
Okay, great. I mean, as we digitise our companies and obviously in terms of redesigning our products and services as manufacturing businesses, there's a lot of complexity that sits within that, and it's not as easy as we first think because factories aren't perfect and we're not all building greenfield sites. So I think this piloting phase and for companies ourselves to really start to find a way to be able to get these technologies in either quickly and also cost effectively with what is obvious, and we're very driven by return on investment. It'd be great to sort of share as we go through some of these questions how we might relate that to a business particularly itself. I mean, ultimately, it's all about closer closer interaction with our customers, and our customers ask us and demand us to bring them solutions, and I think that's something that we really impose back on either our suppliers or technology providers. Bronwyn, would you be able to just sort of highlight, I suppose, just in terms a little bit about the factory of the future? We've had some experience there. Just how that might work in terms of an Industry 4.0. You touched on the new opening coming up. What are the things that you're putting in there that perhaps might facilitate?
Okay, so my background is carbon fibre composite materials, which are at Industry 2.0. Even if you go to the most sophisticated factory in the world, there's still a significant amount of manual intervention. So the test lab that we are creating at Swinburne is actually focused on how we can automate and digitalise the production of carbon fibre composites. That's the next big challenge for this material, which is experiencing an enormous growth in demand. So it went from a $14 billion industry in 2012, and it will be more than $36 billion by the year 2020. So it's growing very quickly. We're working very closely with Morand and CNC Design, Siemens and Bosch to do that. And one of the roles that we can play, Morand is a fantastic Australian company based in Melbourne that has done amazing work for Boeing on the 787 Dreamliner with their facility for making flaps and ailerons, but they can't showcase that. They can't take people through to see that unless it's really special circumstances. So the work we're doing in the Factory of the Future will give them the ability to showcase that and really demonstrate their capabilities to other businesses.
Great, thanks. Ztiki, I know that we've had experience with your technology, so what are the things that companies need to be looking at in terms of what are the gaps that sometimes your processes or your technology might solve today that companies maybe don't even realise they might be able to use?
Well, I think we tapped on that, or a few people over here tapped on that already. We're talking about manual labour, we're talking about an industry which is a bit conservative. You're still, you have those factories which the investment on them were huge. There are a lot of cost related, and they're looking to reduce the cost to be much more efficient, to be upgraded to the next level in terms of technology, and this is exactly what we're coming to do.
Sure.
We learned that, if you come into the system and you search and see how the factory is being managed, what's the processes, how they manually do things, and then you go ahead and digitize everything, make it interactive to the end users without actually changing the process, but just making it more efficient. That drops the cost. That makes everything more efficient. They have remote monitoring. So we learned that, you can go for days doing maintenance, repairs, or whatever the operation is, and nobody in the management will have any real-time information to pick up on until this process has ended. And once you provide them with, let's call it a dashboard in real time, that will be solving a lot of problems, shift-wise, human resources, capabilities, everything is tapped into the same central system.
Great. I mean, one question I'll come back to with the panel is, it seems as though senior management are going to need a range of dashboards today because everybody has a dashboard of information, there's a lot of data coming through, there's probably something just within that itself of being able to do that reporting element. Carlos, in terms of your robotics and the deep learning element of that, we have obviously factories ourselves that aren't perfect. So as we say, everyone's not building a greenfield site. What is it and what's the deep learning element that sort of brings your robots and your technology into, say, even older factories and factories where you can improve current processes?
Yeah, so part of the problem they face today when a factory needs to be upgraded because they're not perfect and old is that you need to do major changes in setup, major changes in equipment, and new equipment will not fix the old one, will not fit the old one. So we believe that the robot or the solution has to adapt to the reality of the environment. And if it's an old factory, then the improvement should be in the specific place where this user has the problem. And the technology should adapt to the reality that is around it. So this is what we do. I mean, the moment you get data from what's going on around you, and the moment you are able to adapt to this data, the robot can learn. So it makes the solution, the way much easier to move to improve. I will give you one example.
Sure.
For example, let's say in this solution we are implementing, we are picking things from a conveyor. Now, conveyor, if it gets old, the engine will be less reliable, and if you connect to it, you will not know exactly when this particular object is going to be in a few seconds. So we're not connecting to the conveyor, we're looking at it visually. And as things go, we learn of what is the pace of the conveyor, if it's moving a little bit not constant. How do we predict the position of the object? And this is plug and play. The user doesn't have to do anything. So I think this is the type of things that the old factories need in order to improve.
Fantastic. Ran, I suppose we saw your presentation before, and I'm sure you've had a number of people come up and say how impressed they were. I think that dramatic music makes it even more impressive, and it's almost very Hollywood. So to touch on the topic that Amnon talked about, but you said you are going into this secret world, what are the things typically that a company or a business might look for that, we talked about earlier, that there might be the ability to employ the technology or not employ the technology? What are some of the barriers, or what are some of the things that people might not realise they may need or may be able to utilise with your technology specifically?
Okay, so I'll answer that in reference to drones as a whole.
Sure.
And then specifically, obviously, because our drones are the best. So
of course.
I don't need to. But drones open up a third dimension. So factory now works in 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
Now you have a third dimension, and that entails a lot of information. Some of it is redundant and irrelevant. Some of it is just, cool to have, but again, it's another dashboard that nobody needs. We spend a lot of time in ICL and Intel refining exactly what is the information that might be relevant. So flying a drone for, around the perimeter is nice, it's effective, but it's not as effective as maybe inspecting a silo, okay, instead of sending someone up to check it. So I think, generally speaking, from all the markets that we've looked at, that we can say that are part of this group that's called industrial facilities. So if we look at refineries and seaports and fabrication facilities and mines, nuclear facilities, everybody can use drones there to a very range of different applications. The hard part is to get them to realize it. That's a problem.
Right.
It's very hard. It's very conventional. This technology looks like it comes from the future, so people are not very always, they're not sure. Once they get to experiment it and see how the ROI is actually generated, on top of it being cool, but actually seeing where the ROI comes from, then it becomes a game changer, I think.
Yeah. And there seems to be so many other applications outside of sort of standard. We were talking with a colleague around just pure surveillance, even just from a shark surveillance perspective at Australian beaches. Seems to be a common phenomenon today. So it deploys itself and starts looking for those nasty sharks. Amnon, I suppose we touched on it a little bit earlier also, just in terms of the AI piece, but I just wanted to start, we're a large business ourselves, and we have critical mass of trucks and movements and things like that day to day, and we would have millions of movements every year. With Mobileye, and I suppose we saw that with ABI recently, did a test in the US utilising a driverless truck. What is it in terms of, is it consistency, or is it a level of routineness that will allow this technology to be adopted early in terms of, say, a business themselves with high levels of movement?
Well, driverless trucks, actually I have bad news in that area. Rather than saying, okay, this is the next frontier, I think it will never happen. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I think there isn't much of an economical value in driverless trucks. So if you look at the heavy trucks, the Class 8 trucks, they're very expensive. The payload that they carry is even more expensive. Could be worth millions of dollars. The cost of a mistake is horrendous. This large truck is like a weapon. If it gets into an accident, imagine the kind of carnage that it will cause. And then the cost of the driver, in the context of all what I have said, is infinitesimal. Mm-hmm. So why would you do that?
Sure.
Why would you send a truck without a driver? Now, you could say, let's put driverless technology in order to make the driving experience more relaxed. But who cares? These drivers, they don't get paid so much. So at the end of the day, the economical value doesn't justify the huge investment, which is very, very different from passenger cars.
Right.
Okay, so technologically it is possible, but I don't believe it will happen.
And as you touched on before, this world of artificial intelligence, there is a lot of misconceptions. We're all very worried about it, and maybe with not good cause. Do you have a view, or do you have a sort of an explanation for the audience here, just to calm the nerves a little and perhaps make us all sleep easier at night, that the air conditioner isn't going to come and attack us in bed?
Yeah, that's so let's think about artificial intelligence. I think a key is to understand that humans and machines are kind of opposites of each other. So what is difficult for humans is normally easy for computers, and vice versa. So when something is difficult for a human, what humans do, they like solving a differential equation. You write down a set of rules, a kind of set of formal rules. Now, translating these rules into a computer program is relatively easy. This is why computers can do things that are very, very difficult for us, like solving equations or doing repetitive tasks that humans are not good at. So anything that can be described as a set of formal rules is very natural for computers to do, and is very unnatural for us to do, for us humans. On the other hand, doing stuff like perception and natural language understanding, our brain does it effortlessly. So we don't need to write a set of rules in order to learn those tasks. So we understood that we need to write a set of rules for those tasks in order to make machines do perception, in order to machines code a language. And for decades, humans have been trying to codify these tasks as a set of rules, and that was unsuccessful. Now, even the simple task of trying to describe how a face, a human face, looks like in order to do face detection by a computer, the early attempts in the 70s were trying kind of to do a rule-based. There are eyes, there is nose, there's a geometrical relationship between the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and so forth. It never really worked. It never reached a performance level that is impressive as the human performance level. And there comes machine learning, which AI is part of machine learning. In machine learning, it's a data-driven process. You take a lot of data that has been manually labeled, and you use this data with statistical engines, with statistical analysis, to allow computers to figure out the rules by themselves. So the computer figures out the rules, and sometimes we, the programmers, do not even know what those rules are. It's kind of embedded in a huge, deep network, in the parameters of a network, and somehow it kind of solves itself. And what happened in the past decade that didn't happen before that, it's not that humans became more clever and all of a sudden AI now is possible, and 10 years ago we were all stupid and we did not have AI, is that two things happened. One is computing power has grown exponential to a point of view where a small microchip that could cost a few tens of dollars can rival a supercomputer of 10 years ago. So computing power is much more accessible, it's low cost, and it's portable and very accessible. Second thing, because of the rise of the internet, data is accessible. We have lots and lots and lots of data available that can be used for the machine learning algorithms. So if we summarize that, the state of AI is that we can now solve narrow problems, not broad intelligence. It's not going to be the rise of the robots or the Skynets. We're not talking about programs that they have their own conscience, that they have their own self-motivation, their own goal, just like a spreadsheet doesn't have its own motivation or goals. And they can do sophisticated things like do image interpretation. And that is very useful to drive autonomous cars, for robotics, for virtual reality, moving autonomously in cluttered environment. This is something that has many, many applications.
And moving robotic arms also.
And robotic arms. It's huge in terms of the applications. Also, and a coding language, taking sound and translating it into text, and from text translating it into natural language understanding, like when you are talking to Google now or to Siri or to Cortana. It's not as good as humans, it's far away, but it's getting there. It's getting there to the point of, we can communicate with the computer not only to extract information, but actually for fun. The movie Her, I recommend everybody to see that movie because it's not really science fiction, that movie. I could imagine 5-10 years from today, we can communicate with our computer for fun and really get attached to it. Right? We have kind of virtual friends. So all of this is possible today, having programs that can read academic papers and extract meaning and find a connection that will help scientists do research more efficiently. Writing technical documents can be done automatically. All these things are reality, but it has nothing to do with consciousness and self-motivation.
Well, hopefully that can allay some of the fears that we might have. I'm struggling to talk to Siri on my computer as I just did an upgrade on my computer, so I'll stop at my fear there.
Yeah.
Bronwyn, Industry 4.0 and the role that universities are going to play. Obviously, some of the universities, Technion, Yusum in Israel that we've visited, are clearly set up with the expertise in that space. In Australia, with your view, and I know that your experience with Deakin previously, but now with Swinburne, what's the role that you see universities, particularly in Australia, playing, whether it be the adoption of technology that comes from Israel and or technology that we're developing here?
I think primarily universities have a role and a responsibility to train and educate the workforce of the future. So there's two ways that we're doing that at Swinburne. We've established our innovation precinct, which is focused on postgraduate and undergraduate students, and we're training them to think in a different way and to be really innovative. We've actually just rolled out Industry 4.0 apprenticeship, so we have a pilot program there, which is fantastic. I think universities and university academics have a role to be thought leaders, and where academics are very globally connected, we have to be to keep ahead in our field. And so there's the opportunity for local businesses to tap into that global connectivity and really make the most of it. And I think more and more we're going to see universities creating business-to-business connections rather than just being a research provider, where it will be a solutions provider, and that's something we're definitely very focused on in our Industry 4.0 activities. And I was really excited to meet Ztiki yesterday because we're working with a beverage company in Victoria, and I can immediately see that the two of you working very closely together, that you have the solution they need for their business. So there's a whole wide range of things that universities can do, and I think that it will broaden over time, that universities will play a more and more critical role because we're neutral, we're open access, we talk to everyone, we're globally connected, and all of those things are really critical for the future.
Right. Yeah. One thing I touched on before, and I might put it to the three guys at the end there. So Ran, maybe you might start. The data that you collect, and the data, it worries me a little bit as someone in manufacturing. How much data am I going to have? What am I going to do with it? Is it easy to manage? Where does it all go? How many dashboards do I need in my office to be able to see what's actually going on? In your case, is that something that you've considered perhaps with the data that you actually get, but then where it goes and what you do with it, how that might translate across, the standard manager's desk?
That's a good question. I think one of our greatest realizations was, aside from building the platform, was understanding just that. People don't want heaps of data. They want the information. So I can pre-schedule one of our machines to fly itself every day to measure a stockpile at a mine and generate 10 gigs of photos with geolocation posts on each. But the mine doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
The surveyor cares about one thing. What is the number that this pile has? And that's zero size of data. So he wants to get in the morning and see that there's 27,633 cubical tons of ore. That's
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah.
He doesn't care that the drone does it or how many pictures I've took. He
Sure.
just wants that number.
Yeah.
So that's what we're focusing on, and I think that's the biggest value proposition you can offer to the client, giving them the insightful and actionable information instead of heaps of data, because they're already estranged from that, and they're already scared from every new technology that comes into these facilities comes with a dashboard and servers, and nobody needs that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Carlos, for yourself the same. I mean, the data that you get, whether it be efficiency, we know from our factories and our managers who have, in some cases been up there to 20 years, they know the numbers in their heads and they know what the efficiencies are. Is it a similar process for you? Is it sort of a dashboard, or is it just really purely demonstrating that from the efficiencies that you might gain, or that hidden layer of deep learning that we talk about that sort of is somewhere between what actually happens and the executables?
Yeah, this layer is usually hidden. I mean, the user doesn't need to see this data. It's also very technical data. From the raw data all the way to the result, everything in the middle is a bit messy to the eye.
Sure.
But we take advantage of this data selectively, and we use it to improve our algorithms and to improve, of course, the solution to the end user. But one thing I wanted to emphasize with this accumulation of data and this sudden availability of tools that are very advanced and the relative low price is the effect on small and medium manufacturers that I think we usually keep them aside. But this, I think, this is going to be the real boom. I mean, these companies are going to be able to compete just on terms of the know-how they can generate, how they teach these systems, what type of know-how they create.
Yeah.
And I think this is also one impact of Industry 4.0.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And Ztiki, you're almost at the moving of the data live, right? So again, it's another dashboard, it's another device perhaps that you're looking at. What is it particularly from your perspective? I mean, the advantages of moving it forward and having it live can you give us sort of some examples perhaps that you've had in industry where, I know the aeronautic side of things and the medical side of things, and you also know our factory quite well as well, or one of our factories quite well, in terms of some of the cultural change that's going to take place with older type employees who, we're still teaching some of our directors how to operate in Twitter and Facebook, let alone something using a device such as yours. What's the ease of carrying that, and some of the advantages that you might have seen with some other companies?
Right. So I actually wanted to talk about it because we all spoke about AI and all those advanced capabilities, but eventually you have to remember that still currently we have a man in the loop, what we call. And those guys that have been working around for 30, 40 years in the plant, they know better than any machine how to operate, and they don't need all that information as you mentioned before. Yeah. So what we try to do is to simplify things, is to take their existing protocol, their existing workflow or work orders, just digitize them, make them more efficient, more faster, in real time, provide them the information. So one of the key elements in any software, as anybody knows, is to actually customize that per the client requirements. So you're not just selling off-the-shelf product, you need to customize, you need to actually understand what the requirements of the client is and then adapt your software to those requirements. And once you build it together, and actually together we're sitting at the sites with the guys and understanding and going to the bits and bytes of how they work through every minute of the day. Once you do that in a friendly manner, as everybody says, user-friendly, but it actually has to be friendly to the user, they will take that and benefit from that system. So it's making the information available. It's cost reduction because eventually at the end of the day you need to show or prove that this software is not another tool that is nice to have, but it actually reduces the time that you have shutdowns or you're able to be up and running better. We have business cases from manufacturers of anywhere between 15 to 18% cost reduction in their yearly maintenance, which translate to a lot of dollars. Even in industries such as the airlines that you mentioned, we're currently providing the services to major airlines, and you have those big assets, all right, which cost anywhere between $150 to $200 million. And if anybody flies out of here, take a look, you still have those guys running around with a yellow vest with a piece of paper maintaining those high-value assets. And we want to change it. We want to adapt the way that you do your procedures and the way that you maintain things or you supervise things to actually the value of the assets involved.
It was interesting. I was reading through some of the background, and one of the key things is, and I love the quote, was we all need to become data virtuosos. So we need the ability to be able to understand and interpret that. One of the things, and I know a commonly used word in Israel is ecosystem, and it was one of my favourite words there, just by understanding what is going on there, is it, and I open this to anyone in the panel to answer, is it an ecosystem that we need to think of, say from a business perspective, so not from the technology, as an ecosystem to be able to understand and translate what could be multiple technologies, because everybody's technology could be applicable, and sort of, I suppose, a little bit of touching on how do you prioritise? Like for a lot of businesses, and we're sitting there at the same stage, where the hell do we start? You know, and how do you prioritise these? Is it the rightness of the technology, or is it the biggest problem that we might have? Some would argue the biggest problem, but that's maybe purely driven by financial. It might be driven by safety. In Rand's case, it might be driven by a security perspective. But what is it that we think need to do as a business from an ecosystem perspective? I open up to anyone.
So you want us to do your job, basically. You have to prioritize.
Pretty
right?
much.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't want to be done out of a job, and I think, you know, given the last session, we're a little bit nervous in terms of, you know, everything seems to be replacing a job, and we had that chat outside. But are we actually replacing jobs? You know, in fact, it sometimes creates other jobs.
So this is, in our case at least, everybody thinks the robot replaces it. It does not happen. It's usually the opposite. What it increases is their productivity. So they need to produce more, and then they bring more people in. Other type of skills, though, but this is the case. In terms of priority, I like the concept of what they call the fruits that are closer to you, right? So it's like the small investment, big benefit, and starting always with something that's not big, just to show the concept. If you have need for 20 robots, start with one, see, check it, and then go up. This is my philosophy to the clients, and also the way we address this type of problem.
Yeah.
I think it's also pending on how fast can you deploy something and how easy it is to deploy it. If it's something complex, then you have to take in consideration 2-3 years before it will be actually deployed and bring value. If you can create something that in the next 3 to 6 months people would like, people would use, show the benefits, show the ROI, then you can always, you know, escalate that and increase the value.
Yeah, and it's sort of, I suppose, to that point, removing the novelty factor. We would all love to have trucks that drive themselves, cars that drive themselves, and/or the Airobotics side of things. But please, Rand.
With our clients, I think it's divided to two. First is human lives. So that would be the most direct derivative of what we're doing. If our system can mitigate the time between an emergency situation and until people understand what's going on, there's a lot of, obviously a lot of value there. That's added value. It's not direct ROI, but getting to that point where you can actually save lives with the machine is usually highly prioritized at first. And then the second thing is, I think, by a very simple method of, Dr. Liao Goldratt, theory of constraints. You just look at the funnel of the operation, wherever the constraint is, hit that, and then funnel from there. That's usually the best way to get the best ROI, depending on the business process you're looking at.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely that machines will take over complete jobs. I think what will happen is that humans and the machines will work in harmony together, where computers are gradually taking over the mundane and repetitive jobs. The definition of what is mundane and what is repetitive is kind of evolving. Writing a technical document today is a profession. In the future, it's something mundane taken by a computer. But it's not that the human is out of the loop. The human is there, but is doing more and more creative part of the work. And this is where education is very, very important. It's a society that doesn't put emphasis on education, doesn't put emphasis on training their workforce to think in terms of innovation, in terms of science, then that society will be taken over by computers.
Yeah.
But as long as the education is there, computers will not take jobs away. So.
And I read something in terms of the priorities or the jobs most at risk. I think accountants was one of them, and we'd all love to have less accountants in the world, as they have that negative element. But please, Bronwyn.
I went to see Siemens' flagship Industry 4.0 factory in Hamburg in Germany, where you have PLCs making PLCs effectively. And the really surprising thing for me was walking in there and seeing how many human beings were in there. They've got 1,100 employees, and there were people buzzing around, but they weren't doing the normal factory jobs. They were meeting in groups around whiteboards and problem solving and coming up with process improvements rather than doing the repetitive operation. So that gave me a great deal of hope in terms of workforce, but that means that universities need to play a role in transitioning the existing workforce into these new workplaces.
I mean, there's a number of videos around that showcase the replacement of university courses and how they become redundant after 5 years, because what are you educating the future stars of our world for? And just in closing, I suppose, you know, it's for us as a business, and our experience that we've had with Israel has not only been fantastic, and I know that Etty has done an amazing job we do some amazing speed dating, and I highly recommend speed dating for anybody who goes to Israel. We did 40 companies in 2 days, and Carlos was actually one, and Ztiki, I think we sort of knew you beforehand. It was interesting, a conversation, and this is probably the generational shift that we're seeing with Industry 4.0. I was travelling with somebody on the plane recently back from Israel, and he said, I can still walk into a paper machine, feel it, hear it, and understand what's going wrong with it. And I said, yeah, I've just been in Israel and understand that I can get all that data on a dashboard on my desk and still have that creativity and that ability to be able to interpret. And sometimes what I might be able to do that's different to what you did in the past was probably predict. And I think predicting and understanding how Industry 4.0 is going to affect us is showcased by these fantastic technologies here. So thank you, and I'd like you to thank also our panel today.
Thank you, and please keep the applause going for Richard, who led the session. Thank you, guys.